27 years. That is how long Deborah Lee Furness stood beside Hugh Jackman. Through the early struggling years when no one outside Australia knew his name. Through the auditions that went nowhere, the roles that almost happened, the long stretches of uncertainty that test every relationship before success ever arrives. She was there for all of it. And then she was there for the explosion. The moment Hugh Jackman stopped being a promising Australian actor and became something the world could not look away from. Through every red carpet, every magazine cover, every breathless profile about what a remarkable man he was, she stood beside him. Smiling, steady, gracious. And through every whisper the tabloids never quite let die, she said nothing. For 27 years, she protected that marriage the way only someone who truly loves another person can. Quietly. Completely. At great personal cost. And then, after nearly 3 decades, he walked into a new life. And for almost 2 more years after that, she still said nothing. Until May 2025, when she finally used one word that broke the silence wide open and rewrote everything the public thought they understood about why the marriage ended. Betrayal. One quiet, devastating word to the Daily Mail that dismantled every polite sentence in the joint statement they had released together. But to truly understand why that word landed the way it did, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand who this woman actually was before she became Hugh Jackman's wife. Because that part of the story almost never gets told. Deborah Lee Furness was never just someone's partner. Long before Hugh Jackman existed in the public consciousness, she had already built a career, a reputation, and a name that meant something in the Australian entertainment industry. She was an accomplished actress and producer. She had done the work, put in the years, earned her standing. She was also 13 years older than Hugh, a fact the tabloids never tired of mentioning, a fact she never once seemed bothered by. When they met on the set of an Australian television drama in 1996, the dynamic was clear to everyone around them. He was the unknown, the newcomer, the young actor with potential but no proof yet. She was the established star. She had the name, the credits, the credibility. And she chose him. They married that same year, 1996, and what followed was a partnership that would span nearly 3 decades and survive more than most marriages ever face. Because Hugh Jackman did not stay unknown for long. Within a few years, everything changed. The X-Men franchise turned him into a global icon. Wolverine made him one of the most recognizable faces on Earth. Les Miserables earned him an Academy Award nomination. The Greatest Showman gave him a cultural moment that transcended cinema entirely. The man she had married when he was still finding his footing became one of the most beloved, most celebrated, most talked about men in Hollywood. And through every single step of that rise, Deborah Lee was the steady ground beneath him. She raised their 2 adopted children, Oscar and Ava, largely away from the cameras. She showed up to every premiere, every award show, every moment that mattered to him publicly. She smiled through every intrusive question about why they had not had biological children, about their age gap, about whether the marriage was truly as perfect as it appeared. She never corrected the narrative. She protected it. Because that is what you do when you love someone and when you believe in the life you are building together. You carry it. Even when the carrying gets heavy. Even when it costs you more than anyone watching can see. But here is where the story shifts. Here is where the timeline, when you look at it carefully, starts to tell a very different version of events than the headlines ever suggested. On September 15, 2023, Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness released a joint statement. It was warm, carefully worded, almost poetic in the way it framed the end of a marriage as something peaceful and chosen. It spoke of almost 3 decades of a wonderful, loving marriage. It described their paths as now shifting, their decision to separate described as a mutual pursuit of individual growth. It asked for privacy as their family navigated this new chapter. The world read that statement and exhaled. What a graceful uncoupling, people said. 2 adults, 2 professionals, handling the end of a long marriage with exactly the kind of dignity you would hope for. No blame. No bitterness. Just 2 people who had loved each other deeply, grown in different directions, and chosen to part respectfully. And for a full year and a half, that was the story. Deborah gave no interviews. She did not post anything cryptic on social media. She did not let slip a single comment that contradicted the version they had released together. She let the narrative stand. Amicable. Respectful. Mutual. She held the line even then, even after the marriage was over, even as she began to process privately what had actually happened. And that restraint, that continued protection of his image even after he was no longer hers to protect, is perhaps the most telling detail in this entire story. Because while she was staying quiet, something else was becoming impossible to ignore. Hugh Jackman had spent the better part of 2 years starring in the Broadway revival of The Music Man alongside Sutton Foster, one of the most celebrated actresses in American musical theatre. The production ran from February 2022 through January 2023, right through what would turn out to be the final chapter of his marriage to Deborah. By all public accounts, the show was a triumph. Critics loved it. Audiences adored it. Hugh and Sutton had electric chemistry on stage, the kind that reviewers described in glowing terms and audiences felt in their seats. What the reviews did not capture, however, was what was apparently an open secret among those who worked on that production. Multiple Broadway insiders, speaking to the press after the relationship became public, confirmed what many in that world had already known. One person who worked directly on that show said it plainly: Sutton and Hugh's relationship is the reason Hugh and Deborah got divorced. A lot of people on Broadway knew. And they kept it quiet because both of them are so well liked, so professional, so genuinely respected. They kept it quiet. Colleagues kept it quiet. The industry kept it quiet. But the woman who had given 27 years of her life to this man, who had raised his children and protected his reputation and stood by him through everything, had to find out the same way the rest of the world eventually did. Because on January 6, 2025, the photos went everywhere. Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster in Santa Monica, walking hand in hand in the afternoon sun, smiling at each other with an ease and a comfort that does not come from something new. That comes from something that has already had time to settle. That comes from something that was already real long before it became public. And if you have ever seen photos like that of someone you loved, you already know what they say without a single caption needed. And that is the moment, that precise moment, when the joint statement started to crack. For months after those photos circled the globe, Deborah Lee Furness filed for divorce. Nearly 2 years after the carefully crafted separation announcement. Nearly 2 years of silence, of dignity, of letting the world believe the version that had been agreed upon. And when the Daily Mail reached out for comment as the divorce filing became news, she did not repeat the amicable language. She did not reference mutual growth or shifting journeys or any of the soft, careful words that had shaped the public narrative for so long. She said this: "My heart and compassion goes out to everyone who has traversed the traumatic journey of betrayal. It is a profound wound that cuts deep." Stop there for a moment. Because she did not have to use that word. She could have said something vague and gracious one more time. She could have wished him well, cited the need for privacy, said something that protected the joint statement one final time. She chose not to. She chose one specific word that quietly and completely dismantled everything polite they had said together 18 months earlier. Betrayal. Not separation. Not diverging paths. Not two people growing in different directions at the same time. Betrayal. The kind of word that has a direction. The kind of word that says there was someone who did it and someone who had it done to them. The kind of word that makes the timeline make sudden, terrible sense. And if you have ever been in a relationship where you kept protecting the other person's image long after they stopped protecting you, you know exactly what it costs to finally say that word out loud. To stop carrying the story they needed the world to believe. To put it down. To call it what it actually was. Because here is what the full timeline reveals when you lay it all out. The Music Man runs from February 2022 to January 2023. 8 months after it closes, Hugh and Deborah released their separation statement in September 2023. 14 months after that, in January 2025, Hugh and Sutton go public with photographs that suggest not a new romance but an established one. And people who worked on that Broadway production confirm, on record, that the relationship was already known within that world. Deborah Lee Furness, the woman who had given that man 27 years, found out through photographs in a tabloid. She processed it privately. She stayed quiet for 4 more months. And then she filed for divorce and she finally used the word that told the truth. What makes her statement even more remarkable, though, is not just the word she chose. It is everything that came after it. Because Deborah Lee Furness did not stop at naming the wound. She told the world what she did with it. She wrote, "I believe in a higher power and that God, the universe, whatever you relate to as your guidance, is always working for us. This belief has helped me navigate the breakdown of an almost 3-decade marriage. Even when we are presented with apparent adversity, it is leading us to our greatest good, our true purpose." Read that again slowly. It is leading us to our greatest good, our true purpose. Not I am shattered. Not he broke me beyond repair. Not I will never recover from this. She named the betrayal with absolute clarity, and then she refused to let it be the final word of her story. She decided that the woman walking away from 27 years was not diminished by what had been done to her. She was clarified by it. She was being led somewhere. She chose to believe that even the worst of it, even the humiliation of watching your ex move publicly into a new relationship while you were still quietly processing the end of your marriage, even that was part of something larger than the pain of the moment. That is not denial. She made sure of that by using the word betrayal. She did not soften what happened. She named it clearly. And then she chose to survive it on her own terms, with her own faith, with her own sense of where she was going next. At 58 years old, after 27 years of marriage, after a year and a half of holding the joint statement together, after 4 months of watching the photographs and the headlines and the world celebrate his new beginning while she processed her private ending, Deborah Lee Furness put down the story Hugh Jackman needed the world to believe. She said the word. Just one word was enough. And then, with the same grace and the same quiet dignity she had carried through every year of that marriage, she turned and walked into the rest of her life. Only this time, the dignity was entirely for herself. She did not owe it to anyone else anymore. There is something almost unbearable about a woman who loves so fiercely and so loyally that she will protect someone else's image even after that person stopped protecting her. And there is something quietly magnificent, something that takes your breath away a little, about the day she finally decides she does not owe anyone that protection anymore. Not even him. She did not write a tell-all book. She did not go on television to dismantle his reputation piece by piece. She did not air every private wound, every private conversation, every moment of the marriage that the world never saw. She simply, finally, stopped pretending that the ending had been mutual. And in doing that, with that one word, she gave every person watching permission to do the same. To stop pretending. To name the thing. To call it what it was. And then to believe, as she does, with her whole heart, that even this, even the hardest and most humiliating of it, is leading somewhere better. That the survival is the point. Not the betrayal. The survival.